Hello, I'm Judy Stiles. Thank you for joining us for Spotlight on Senior Issues. This series of programs looking at the fastest growing segment of our population, senior citizens. Some issues facing them of interest to not only the seniors, but families, including children and grandchildren. Well, today we're going to look at assisted living, independent living, a topic that comes up often when we're dealing with elderly. And I'd like to start by introducing my guest, Erica Myer, who is an elder care advisor. And of course, we've seen Kelly before. Kelly's a certified senior advisor helping us with these programs. Thank you for being here today. Erica, we're talking about different degrees of people throughout the program, different needs, the stages of life. And when we talk about assisted living or independent living, it's one of those possible stages, I guess, people could go through.
Absolutely. There are different stages, post-acute care, for senior living options. Mm-hmm. You can start with the next level down, which would be skilled, and then you have assisted living, and then you have memory care assisted living, but we also have independent living as well, where you're a little bit more independent and you can make your own decisions and do whatever you would like, and just there for a little bit of peace of mind, just to make sure that you're able to have some nutritious meals during the day and know that someone is always going to be there in case of an emergency.
So for today, in this next half hour, I'd like to take some time to talk about these options, let people know, and I guess really, Kelly, would you say when you've dealt with a lot of seniors and families that a lot of choices have to be made, but it fits the individual, people that are involved?
Yes, and there are going to be different situations for different people. A person who is more social, more outgoing, loves to be around people, assisted living or independent living is a great option. Mm-hmm. And Erica, explain a little bit what the difference is, though, between the independent living and the assisted living.
Well, the independent living, as I mentioned before, is for those folks that are maybe wanting to downsize, maybe wanting some more social interaction. Maybe they're not eating quite nutritiously at home, but they're able to take care of themselves. Okay. So independent living is a great option for those that are looking for that social interaction.
So smaller place,
smaller
but they're
communities.
They're still taking their own medications.
Absolutely.
And things like that.
Yeah, we offer services that are typically they're included depending on what independent living you're going to, mm-hmm. but there's services that are offered typically maybe 1 to 2 meals a day, mm-hmm. Housekeeping, general maintenance of the home, general yard maintenance, anywhere from if you need a light bulb changed, then you just call and someone will be there to fix your light bulb. So that's, independent living is just kind of downsizing, mm-hmm. and maybe pre-planning for the future. Also having that environment, that community of folks that are like you that are looking for some social interaction. Typically there's activities that are scheduled throughout the day, both mm-hmm. spontaneous and scheduled, and then of course there's always help with transportation and different things like that. As far as the assisted living is where you and I partner up in the different businesses that we have respectively, where it becomes more on-demand care versus scheduled care. Once you need that on-demand care, it's probably a good time to start looking for maybe some assisted living. In assisted living, they help with ADLs, and we always like to say that we like for our residents in assisted living facilities to do as much as possible for themselves, because the old saying, once you stop using it, you lose it. Very much a true statement. And so we do encourage residents of assisted living facilities to be as independent as possible and to do what they can for themselves. But what's nice is that maybe they're having just a bad day, or maybe even it's just a bad evening and they need a little bit of help. It's not that scheduled help. It's on demand. And so, there's medication management, there's of course dietary services, 3 meals a day, and snacks are typically included. With assisted living facilities, you have your social interaction with activities, both on-site, off-site, both spontaneous and scheduled. Religious preferences are all honored at most assisted living facilities. And then, I go back to that social interaction because it is so important. If you can imagine being at home by yourself and not really going anywhere and not really having anybody visit you, it becomes rather lonely. And once you become lonely, then a whole other,
A lot of other things
start
accumulates from
happening,
there,
and they start
right.
accumulating. Absolutely.
Well, I know sometimes the public perception or thinks, well, when someone leaves their home, they go to a, quote, nursing home.
Right.
And we're trying to talk today about the different stages of when you leave your house. You know, that's a big step for someone to leave their home they may have lived in for many years. And we're talking about, you know, generations working together a lot on this program. What are some things that maybe the younger generation or the siblings can keep an eye out for? You know, is it time to start thinking about, you know, what the next step is? Mom or dad has to leave the house. You know?
Absolutely. I mean, there's different things like, can mom and dad shower regularly? Have they become behind on their bills? Maybe they have quite a bit of food that's expired in the refrigerator. There's just little signs that us as children and grandchildren even can really look for. Was grandma and grandpa typically very organized, and now they have, you know, piles of papers and unpaid bills, things like that? Has mom or dad fallen, you know, lately? Have they, you know, once again, going back to the social aspect, have they been seeming lonely and asking you to come and visit them more often? You know, those are some great signs, and there's other signs, of course, as well, but those are some really great signs to, you know, maybe give you the inclination it's might be time to start looking around. And I really believe that it is a family you know, get together when you are making that decision and then looking for assisted living. It's definitely a whirlwind for families. Most of them haven't been in this situation
It's
before.
new for a lot of people.
It's
Right.
new. And so, you know, we try very hard, I know Kelly does, and myself, to just give the time, the understanding, the patience to help the families and the one that's looking at maybe living at an assisted living, to give them the time to really answer all their questions and just help them along that path.
And feel as good as possible
Oh,
about
yeah.
the decision.
Right.
And, you know, there's different options available at different places, and it's really important when you're making that kind of a jump to do something that everybody's comfortable with and
Right.
everybody has peace of mind about, so that you have a good outcome.
Right. So it doesn't necessarily have to be we've had a medical crisis or somebody's been in the hospital. What are we
Right.
doing now? It could just be part of that aging process. They can't get on the ladder to change the light bulbs or the dripping
Exactly.
faucets and things like that.
And medication management. A lot of times, you know, we have elders that may have forgotten to take their medications.
Sometimes that's one of the first things doctors start seeing, is that they're not actually taking their pills, or they're forgetting the evening dose of something pretty important and that kind of thing.
And that is one of the things that assisted living does
Right.
offer, is the medication management. To make sure that, you know, our loved ones are taking their medicines right, and that they're eating nutritious meals, and that they're getting the socialization that they need and deserve.
Now you mentioned the meals, and I imagine that
That's
that's also a
huge.
huge concern with the nutrition. And you know, it's hard to cook for two, whether you're single, a young couple, or you're a senior citizen couple.
right.
You know?
Absolutely, absolutely.
And if someone's alone, it's even tougher because you know everything you buy in the store to cook is made for a family of 4 or 6 and so forth.
Well, even recipes. You know, you follow a recipe, and it's usually for 4 to 6 as well.
So by going to these choices, then they were able to know, the family then I guess would know that they are going to be getting some good meals that are nutritionally sound. They're not stretching that same thing all week long just to make money last. and things
Exactly.
like that.
Exactly.
And they're able to socialize while they're eating their meals, so they have their table partners, you know, sitting at the table. And the other thing that I think is really important to understand too is, even though this person, say your mom or grandma, used to be a wonderful cook and love to cook, as they get older and get more frail, the desire to cook, especially when there's not a bunch of family around to feed,
Right, right.
you know, and then just the having the stamina to do it, just oftentimes it's just not worth it to them to do it just for
No.
them. And so then that's when you find them eating the canned sardines or the frozen dinners that are full. And we are going to have a
We're talking about nutrition on this series, right?
The nutrition, because it's so important. But that's where, you know, having that socialization around a meal and being able to eat with friends and eat a good meal actually encourages them to keep their intake up and keep their weight up and their health.
And all
it
that
affects
ties
their
into being
health.
healthy.
And
right?
believe it or not, when we have families that are touring and future residents that are touring different assisted living facilities, the meals is really one of the things that the resident themselves is asking about, because they want to know that they have a choice.
Right.
And nowadays we really across the board are really trying to push choice and person-centered care, and so that even falls into their dining experience, where they
have a choice.
They have a
menu.
choice.
It's not
in the
today you're going to
menu.
have meatloaf and that's it.
Exactly. Typically, facilities and communities will have, and there's different styles. Some may have a full menu. Some may have just an always available menu.
Okay.
But there's always different choices, and it's always surprised me because there's just great choices on there. I've seen choices from fresh fish to salads to the good old cheeseburger. And you know what? If someone has eaten a cheeseburger every day for lunch for the last 10, 15 years, who are we to change that?
Say, no, we don't serve that. You can't have it.
No, if that's what you want, then, and most communities and facilities are going to the person-centered care and the, offering choices for meals and for different things as well. But what we find is that meals are usually one of the first things that's being asked about.
That's a big part of your life.
Oh,
you know?
yeah.
What are we going to eat today? Come home from work. What are we having for dinner?
Exactly.
My kids, I think that's their whole
The first
life.
question, right? What's for
My son
dinner, Mom?
yesterday was teasing me. He was like, "Mom, what's for dinner tomorrow night?"
Yeah.
I'm like,
I haven't even
one
thought
day at a
about
time.
What that menu for the week, right? Well, in addition, then people who may have had that medical situation, maybe a hospitalization, they're recovering from something that they necessarily can't have that care at home. This could be an option to look in for the family.
Yeah, once again, when their care becomes more on demand versus scheduled. I know, Kelly, you can schedule times during the day where you come in.
Right. I think if you look at assisted living as sort of, you've got your rehab choices, and we're going to talk about that as
Right.
well, but somebody would most likely, if they've had, let's say, a hip fracture, they would have their stay in the hospital, and then sort of the continuum of care would be for them to go possibly to a rehab, especially if they're in their 80s, and do a lot of really in-depth physical therapy and that kind of thing. And as soon as they're strong enough and they're able to walk and able to make fire exits and things like that, because I know in assisted living you have to be able to get to the fire exits.
A path to safety.
Path to safety. So once they have developed that level, then they could transition either back to home with maybe some home care or home health, or to assisted living.
Well, and I would like to also mention that in the step-down process, that assisted living is not necessarily always going to be long-term.
Right.
You can go from the rehab center and step down to an assisted living and stay there for anywhere
months, 3
from
months.
days to weeks to months, depending on when you feel you're ready to go back home.
Okay. So it's
Some
going to be a
people-
temporary stay for
Yeah,
people. Right.
some
Yeah.
people might just need some help because they've had surgery and maybe meals and things for, just till they get back on their feet, because they don't have people that can bring
But
in
there's no one
meals
at the
and thi-
home, someone to
yeah,
help there.
Yeah.
So you're looking for
It's a
this
great option.
opportunity, and with assisted care, the assistance you're talking about, giving them that peace of mind. It sounds like in many cases that they're not worrying about did I turn off the toaster this morning? Did I?
Well, and the families have that peace of mind too.
And peace of mind, and I know this is cliche, but it is priceless.
Yes.
It really is. And what we find is the peace of the mind for the families. Really, and in today's society, we're spread out more than we ever used to be. Our families may be several states across, and so they're not able to be there to help in situations where our elders may need some help from family. And so that's when the different levels of care really step up and do become the family of the resident, not only while they're there, but even afterwards, because you do become attached to the
to know the
folks that
people.
you're taking care of.
What about the situation where you may have a married couple where one spouse may need more assistance, but the other one is not in a situation to provide that assistance? Are there facilities or means where they can both go somewhere together?
Well, absolutely. I mean, that's always an option for husband and wife to go together. Other situations that we see are maybe the husband needs a little bit of help with his ADLs, but otherwise he's doing pretty well, but he wants to be close to his wife, and so we can bring them in together, under that circumstances. We've even had where some campuses have 2 different levels of care on the same campus. And so one may be on one side and one would be on the other, but they're still able to spend that time together, which is so very important.
Because that's part of the
that's-
change, is you don't want to split the family
Well,
up in many
typically
cases.
your husband and wife are their own support systems and have been for many, many years. So, you know, we try to accommodate our families,
the
our
pets,
loved ones.
our family pet.
Are pets allowed to be able to have
Pets typically, and it does, you know, differ from different communities. But as we go into the more person-centered care, we're also realizing that pets are extremely important to the folks that may be looking at services. And so, you know, that's always a big question that I recommend folks to ask when they're looking at different communities and facilities, if they have a pet, is to make sure that they are pet friendly.
Okay. Well, let's talk about, you know, those questions to ask. Maybe someone has reached that point where we need to start looking into this, you know, just what are the options, you know, how do you choose a facility?
good
You know, what are some
facility.
of the questions that you recommend people asking when it's time to knock on some doors and come visit some of the facilities?
Well, I actually have 10 tips. They're pretty common sense, but it's nice to put them all together. The first thing that I always notice when I go into a community or a facility is I look around from the time I get out of my car till the time I go inside, and I look at the cleanliness of the campus, the cleanliness of the building, and I always say follow your nose. Sometimes there will be a smell here or there in a community, and typically those are isolated. But if you find that there is a smell throughout the community or facility, then that might be something you want to check into. Another thing is I always recommend that you visit a community on the spur of the moment. Well, maybe not the spur of the moment for you, but unannounced.
Right.
And try to go during a time that they may be having some type of activities, things like that. Because social interaction is so huge that you want to be able to see with your own eyes what kind of social interaction they're getting, what kind of activities. Always look, of course, for the activity calendar, things like that. I think it's always important that you pay attention to the staff and the staff friendliness and their customer service, you know, because that can really make a difference on how your experience will be if you moved into that certain
They're going to be a
community.
part of your new life. Or
They
their own life.
they literally become your family, and so if you find that you have a community that there's smiles on their faces and they're, you know, really treating the residents like they are family, you know, that's always a good sign. And of course, you want to visit the outdoor areas and make sure that there's sufficient outdoor area to be able to sit outside or to get exercise outside, you know, things like that. If you're looking at memory care assisted living, you're always going to want, you're always going to want to make sure that there is a secured area outside for our folks with memory care and Alzheimer's.
I imagine that's important. People don't want to feel like they're just in a room, trapped in a room, or trapped
Absolutely.
into an apartment. You know?
And for me, I am a big outdoor person, and so I couldn't imagine being somewhere where I, you know, didn't have a nice outdoor living area. I actually told my husband when we build our next house that it's going to have just as much outdoor living space as it is indoor.
Right. Well, people like to be with nature, and you can.
And of course, you know, we talked about dietary, so I think it's so very important to always try to eat a meal at the community or the facility. It gives you an idea of how they serve. Is it restaurant style, or is it here's your meal? You know, and that's going to make a big
The
big decision
welcomeness
for you.
of, you know, being served and having your meals.
Yeah.
Right.
Ask about security and safety questions, and that can be, you know, how do things work during an emergency situation? What happens if there's an elopement, which is, you know, someone may become confused and leaves the community without telling anyone? You know, different things like that. You want to be prepared for those worst case scenarios, even though they may never happen. I think that it's important to prepare yourself so that you know what the steps are in those cases.
I mean, even living in this area, people,
Yeah.
where's the safe tornado shelter? What do you do
Right.
if you have bad weather?
Absolutely.
You know,
And,
you at
like
home
you
we say
said.
we've got a place, but what happens when you go to a facility?
Right.
Exactly.
That's a great question.
Another thing that I always think is important is to ask questions about personal care, but not only ask questions, use your senses. Do you walk in and do you see the residents of the community are well kept? They're shaved,
Shaved.
their hair is fixed, they're wearing clean clothes, and they're dressed nice. And that's one of the things that I have to tell you becomes one of my pet peeves, because
Mine too.
we have a lot of our elderly ladies and gentlemen who are very particular about the way they looked when they were younger.
That's right.
And so why shouldn't we be continuing that for them, for their dignity?
Exactly.
In the communities and the facilities.
So an older man who's always shaved every morning all his life, and suddenly
bet.
he's somewhere, you want to make sure they're not
And
growing that
somebody-
stubble in that beard.
Somebody who might have been a lawyer or something in their past life does not want to suddenly have to wear pajama bottoms and sweatpants all the time.
Yeah.
So, knowing where they came, I've got one little lady, she always wants her lipstick and her earrings.
She still wants to look like
Absolutely.
before she went there.
And I think, and sometimes, as I said before, there's bad days, there's good days for everyone. And sometimes even on a bad day, you may not feel like putting that lipstick or earrings on, but wouldn't it be nice to have someone to come in and say, honey, let's put your lipstick on, let's get those earrings on you. It brings a smile to their face for a couple of different reasons. One, we care about them, and they can tell that. And two, they're going to look good when they go out to visit with all of their friends in the community. So, that's always important in my eyes. Getting feedbacks from other residents and from family. There is nothing wrong when you go in to tour a community. There is nothing wrong with sitting down with the residents and just asking them, what do you like about this place? What are your dislikes? It's okay. They're going to tell you. They're going to tell you.
honest.
They'll be very honest. So, always get questions and feedbacks. And a lot of communities are also displaying or putting their letters of recommendation or their thank you letters into books, into photo albums, which sometimes are displayed. It just depends on the community
Or
you
how
go
they
to.
approach it,
But if they're not displayed, you can ask, do you have any recommendations from past family members, from past residents, things like that. So then we have just a couple more tips. We always want to ask about move out criteria, because we know that moving elders is not always the easiest on them. It can actually cause more problems. So you don't want to go into a community and thinking that's where you'll be for the rest of your life, which is quite possible, but we always want to make sure that you know what the steps
There's
are.
a next stage of care. What do you do
exactly.
to help with that?
And then most importantly, trust your instincts. I always say the proof is in the pudding. If you just taking a tour, doing all of your research, talking to everyone, spending the time, the proof's in the pudding. Trust your instincts.
Ultimately, what you're feeling.
That feeling is important.
Now, you mentioned research, and so many people today, go to the internet to try to find out information. So facilities might have websites, or there
Yes.
state agencies that might list or have categories, or things. How can they do that? Online research. Let's say the younger generation wants to say, I want to look at some things online before I decide even where I'm going to visit.
Well, there are definitely several different websites out there. There's websites that are actual companies that have a lot of information for assisted living, but then there's also the Assisted Living Federation, National Assisted Living Association, things like that they can go online and really get a lot of information. And because I don't want to send someone to one particular website,
right.
the best thing I can say is to Google assisted living information.
And so that is one way to supplement what you're seeing by visiting firsthand, or perhaps
Absolutely.
look at
And I
facilities.
think
But
education prior to even going to the communities is so important.
And that's, again, this whole series we've been talking about preparation and preparing ahead of time instead of waiting for a crisis to happen, so that you are able to select a facility that you really are going to enjoy, rather than being pushed into a decision at the last minute where you have to hurry up and make a decision.
Well, and what we find is that those that take the time to do the research and start looking at communities are happier with their choice of the facility that they've chosen than those that are quickly choosing without education and all of that.
So we're, once again, the research and then working together as a family. It's not the
Right.
children telling the parents, "You're going here, Mom. You're going here, Dad." Let's make this
Yeah.
decision together.
And as I said before, I think it's important to have the family, the whole family, help make the decision.
And once you make that decision and the family members in a facility, you encourage families to keep a part of that life. I mean, they're not just there and
absolutely.
we'll come visit you every once in a while.
Absolutely. Most communities will have different family events or family nights. They'll have different events throughout the year that they're always inviting families to. Most communities that I know of, even in the Joplin metro area, they do that with their residents and family members because as communities feel, when they bring in a resident, they're not just bringing in their resident, they're bringing in their entire family.
Right.
And they do all become one big family.
Now, I know we also have a program in this series that dealt with Medicare and the financial aspects. People are going to wonder about costs for facilities. Obviously, you can't say that it's going to cost this much across the board, but those considerations are things that families look at as well.
Absolutely. And the cost is going to vary depending on the different community. And then within each community, there's going to be different size rooms. Some communities even have level pay where they have different levels of care that you may need. The particular community I work for, we have an all-inclusive plan. So regardless of if you may need a little bit more help tomorrow than you did today, your price is never going to change on that. Typically, we see assisted living facilities for a private room running around $3,500 a month.
Okay.
But remember, that includes your medication management, your social
Meals.
interaction activities, meals, things like that.
So ask what's included in that
Right.
price. as people are
Absolutely
shopping
ask
around.
what's included and if it's all inclusive or if it's level pay, because there are, as I said before, different programs.
So a lot of things to look at. We've talked about the senior population growing. You see a continuing need for this in our communities, the Joplin region? That we're
Oh,
reaching?
absolutely. And in fact, I see a continued need to grow in the next 10 to 15 years for assisted living, just because it's not what our grandparents remember of a nursing home, which was very taboo.
It was
at the
different,
time.
right? If you went to the nursing
Yes.
home, people didn't talk about it.
And that's
much.
where you went to be quote unquote thrown away, and I hate
the
using
end
that
of theirs,
term. Today it's so different. There's so many activities that are going on, and once again, going back to that person-centered care, it's all about the resident versus you have to adhere to our schedule. There is now natural wake times. So you're no longer being bombarded at 5 o'clock in the morning to take your medications. So just those natural waking times and the fact that you have choice and things like that. Choice is the big word. If there's nothing else that I want anyone to remember,
today?
it's you have a choice and you need to utilize it.
Yes.
Well, I'd like to thank you very much for visiting today, providing information for our viewers. And as you said, there's a lot of resources out there, and this is one, as we said, in a series of programs helping people learn about senior care. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And I'd like to thank you, the viewers, for joining us for this edition, I should say, of Spotlight on Senior Issues. And I hope you can join us again as we continue to look at topics of interest to seniors in our community. We'll see you then.